I'm Ryan Grove. This is my wife, Tiffany Grove. This is now cocktail hour with Ryan and Tiffany. Before we were having a dialogues about the flat Earth, but um, there
We're
seems
shelving that for now.
yes, and there seems to be a real need to sort of expand into other
Basically, because
topics.
otherwise it would become some sort of monologue because I kind of got out my, what was it, 15 points.
Yes.
So,
So let's begin. Do you have something that you've been busting at the seams to get out?
well, I do want to kind of talk about Christianity a little bit because we've claimed that we're Christians.
Okay.
And I think, whenever we place a label on something, there's a lot of baggage that goes with that label, and it could be good and it might be bad. So, I wanted to talk about what I think it means to be a Christian, and I was recently reading Leo Tolstoy's book, What I Believe,
I love Leo Tolstoy. I've read War and
and
Peace, all 1,200 plus pages.
the kingdom of God is within you. So, I just wanted to take a quote out of his book, um, and this is actually a quote that he's repeating by Aidan Blue, and he kind of formed the more formal idea of the doctrine of non-resistance that we hear about
You mean like pacifism?
throughout history.
Like don't resist evil
Sure,
with evil, rather?
but of course he bases it on the teachings of Jesus Christ
And rightly so.
because there is probably a lot of secular pacifism too. So there's probably some minor differences in some of the
Like
basic ideology.
Gandhi, or maybe Martin Luther King. Isn't that sort of secular in the way it was
Well,
implemented?
Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was a Christian.
Right, but everyone that he convinced to participate in the doctrine of nonviolence and civil
Well, I wouldn't separate the two.
disobedience
People
weren't all necessarily
people
Christians.
try to do that, but I wouldn't separate the two.
Well, I was just trying to clarify because the example that there are some secular folks out there that also embrace that doctrine.
Oh, sure, yeah, definitely.
Maybe. Hmm.
But so Aidan Blue in his doctrine of non-resistance says, and this is kind of, I wouldn't say agreed, but just some ideology that I feel is what truth is. So I agree with it. And it says, we deny Jacobean doctrine. All wars are unchristian and unlawful, whether offensive or defensive. We believe that the penal code of the Old Covenant, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, has been abrogated by Jesus Christ. And under that new covenant, the forgiveness instead of the punishment of enemies has been enjoined on all his disciples in all cases whatsoever. The history of mankind is crowded with evidences proving that physical coercion is not adapted to moral regeneration, and that sinful disposition of men can be subdued only by love, that evil can be exterminated only by good, that it is not safe to rely upon the strength of an arm to preserve from harm, that there is great security in being gentle, long-suffering, and abundant in mercy, that it is only the meek that shall inherit the earth, for those who take up the sword shall perish by the sword. Hence, as a measure of sound policy, of safety of property, life, and liberty, of public quietude and private enjoyment, as well as on the grounds of allegiance to him as Lord of Lords, we cordially adopt the non-resistance principle, being confident that it provides for all possible confidence in omnipotent power and must ultimately triumph over every assailing force. We advocate no Jacobinical doctrines. The spirit of Jacobinism is the spirit of retaliation, violence, and murder. It neither fears God nor regards man. We would be filled with the Spirit of Christ if we abide evil by our fundamental principles of not opposing evil. By evil, we cannot participate in sedition, treason, or violence. We shall submit to every ordinance and requirement of government except such as our conscience deems contrary to the demands of the gospel.
That's from The Kingdom of Heaven is Within You by Leo Tolstoy.
Right, but he's quoting Aidan Ballou.
Right. So what's Jacobi? Oh wait, who's Aidan Ballou? Is he an American pacifist?
Well, he was an American pastor, I think.
Pacifist?
There was,
Pastor?
I think it was a Puritan or a Quaker
Yeah,
church
yeah.
that
Yeah,
had
I think
broken
you're right.
off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Leo Tolstoy did reference that guy.
That's
few
where,
times.
that's how he decided what his Christian roots probably were.
So what's Jacobian doctrine? Just so that we're clear.
Well, Jacob is the father of the 12 tribes of Israel. His name was changed to Israel.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Why does Tolstoy,
Mosaic law
Jacobian doctrine is sort of an adherence to the
is the
Mosaic law?
Mosaic law. And retaliation.
So you bring this up because you're giving a philosophical and biblical justification for pacifism and turning the cheek. And
Well,
sort of
I'm just saying there's certain truths in the Bible, and I
sure
can't find the shape of the earth in the Bible, but that's just one truth that I think springs out of
that
the
this
message of Christ.
of non-violence
yeah.
or passive
Because
resistance.
he says turn the other cheek. I mean, that's his whole
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear
discourse. And if somebody wants your cloak, give to him your coat also. And if he asks you to walk with him a mile, walk with him twain.
too. Yeah, and it's funny how countries throughout history have utilized the sense of like pride, using their culture to infuse its citizens with that, or propaganda or whatever, and they have this pride. They create this context where someone can actually find goodness in going into battle against somebody they have no idea of, that has never personally offended them or anything, and they kill them. And if all people stopped thinking about the world in a soldierly way, which you're describing, and they would see it in a way that Christ meant for all men to see it, then in fact you would agree that effectively, like, all wars would just stop, all conflict would just stop, and there would be nothing left but for people to empathize with the mutual hardships of reality and work to help each other, rather than divisively carve out nations and these imaginary concepts of societies and that are different, that actually lead to war to begin with.
Well, and what I'm thinking is, he's saying is that, it just has to start where you live or whatever. Like, you have to be that
It's going to
example.
start in here, I guess,
Yeah.
right? Well, if a context of like courage and faith to your country and nationalism and all that stuff, if that works to get people to go kill other people, I would like to say that maybe these the masters of our culture, the masters of our society, we were born and here it was, so somebody other than us made it. So those people use that same method of control to get us to believe in a contrary version of what the nature of our reality is, to what it actually is.
Well, Christians were pretty weak by letting Constantine take over Christianity and combine church and state, so...
But unlike them, you and I are in a position where
Thank goodness
we haven't had the Roman state or the United States like killing and torturing and putting Christians in with lions and coming up with all these creative ways to torture them, contrasted with a sudden turnaround of the powers that be saying, you know what, we're not going to persecute you anymore.
I'm
In
sure
fact,
that was a relief.
what you believe is actually going to become the state belief or
Yeah,
whatever.
I'm sure that was a relief.
But we haven't had that intense crucible to persuade us. But if you believe the Bible's true, then it would only make sense, because when you come out of Pentecost at the beginning and the Nazarene, all the people that are sticking, to precisely what Christianity is, it would take a lot to break them. So I think that was a pretty good strategy, to persecute them, and then say, you know what, all this persecution, you saw your grandparents and your parents and your kids get killed and stuff, but you know what, we're not going to persecute you anymore. In fact, we're going to make what you believe our national religion. And now you're just totally... Have you ever seen V for Vendetta? Mm-hmm. Right? Or the Stockholm Syndrome. It's kind of a... To me, that move was a brilliant kind of Stockholm Syndrome sort of propaganda event, which brilliantly captured true Christianity and returned it to the pagan way of understanding spirituality that we have with the Catholic Church. Mm-hmm. I don't know, something to think about. So what about the Mandela effect? I'm just kidding. I don't believe in the Mandela effect, by the way. But some people say Shakespeare didn't write a lick of any of his plays. And some of the reasons they have for justifying this, the fact that he was
but we
poor,
like his name,
illiterate.
Shakespeare.
That might even have been
Shakespeare.
What's that word that authors use when they, like Stephen King, when he was
a pen name?
Yeah, what's the word for pen name? A pseudonym. Yeah, might have even been a pseudonym imposed on him by Francis Bacon, because Shakespeare has some esoteric meaning, especially when you are deeply involved in worshiping entities such as Apollo and Athena in the 16th, 17th century Europe, in light of what they remembered from leftover remnant Greek traditions that they still tried to... Anyway, but that's neither here nor there. They say that some people say that Shakespeare never wrote any of his plays because he was too uneducated. He had no access to... like the intrigues of the mechanisms of court. Like he wasn't in court yet, in famous courts around the world. Yet he was able to intimately understand how they work and stuff like that. And also the way that he just cranked out play after play after play, and not only that, but sonnet after sonnet and poem. I mean, there's so much like dead on. I'm in the zone doing this stuff, kind of stuff that just doesn't seem to make sense when you get kind of a true vague picture of who Shakespeare actually was. There's a couple of references or a couple of documents that refer to him legally that are left over, and they involve him like selling bad cattle or cheating people on some sort of cattle exchange, or him selling bad food as concessions, at the Globe Theater and stuff. That he's kind of a shady dude. And if you think about that he got taken to court for those petty, ridiculous offenses, and you think that he had the insight to be or not to be Juliet.
There was Mozart, though. He was very coarse and uncouth.
But unlike Shakespeare, he was brought up super educated and just driven by his father to music. So maybe for a short period of time, he was able to withstand that tremendous pressure that is involved and just dead on in his own creation. But Shakespeare, when you look at his life and his background and his resources, it just doesn't make sense. So, like the Simpsons, right? Matt Groening made the first couple Simpsons, and they were super funny, but he couldn't maintain that sort of level of.
And the first Simpsons were quite different too.
Yeah, they were, and he couldn't maintain that constant level of continuity in the caliber of his humor and stuff. It took a team of writers, and so the funniest people were hired from around the United States,
Yes,
and they start
understand.
cranking out the Simpsons every week, and they could go on forever, and no one individual is integral. You know, as soon as somebody gets tired or has another job opportunity, wherever they leave, and they just replace them with somebody else, and they've scoured. And Francis Bacon, according to this crazy story that I've been considering,
Right, he got together a think tank and they
he
created
did. He got a think tank from all the best writers
because
across
they all
Europe,
wrote
and they all started writing
for
Shakespeare.
it. Yeah,
So why would they do this?
to increase the language.
Yes,
Yeah,
they would do it to increase the language.
and then you can control.
Well, what does that
people through language because of advertising.
Right. So if you have a bunch of peasants and you need their output and you need them for your armies and stuff, but man, you just can't control them. What some smart people thought was, well, you know, there's these great philosophies about nationalism and pride and bravery and if we can only teach them the implications necessitated from a philosophical way of thinking about things, we wouldn't have to like beat them and corral them. They would just willingly participate in this. But in order to do
Because
that, you have to expand language enough
Because what would
in
make
order to accommodate some
mothers-
sort of philosophical understanding of
because
reality.
what would make mothers give their dear sons?
That's
to the
right. It's only
country?
some weird, complicated philosophical way of seeing reality that a mother would find any reason to let her baby go fight a battle for old. You know, what's that saying? Wars are fought by young boys for old men. And what mother would do that? None, unless. But so you have to educate them. You have to expand their language
Inculcate them. Yes, I understand.
in order for them to
Embrace things.
embrace philosophical ideas that would
Yeah.
allow them to trap themselves intellectually. However, you
Sure.
can't educate them so much that they're able to think their way out of it and identify the propaganda for
Sure.
what it is, right? And
Yeah.
so
measured education.
and as the Francis Bacon was really interested in North America being discovered, in the cultural possibilities of this fresh
Of it
ground,
being the new Atlantis.
and it would be the new Atlantis.
Right.
Yeah, so and he knew that the people that were going to master that were going to be the masters of the sea at that time, and England was the master of the sea, and so he knew that it would be English. But the if you read like Old English, Middle English, and then Modern English,
Yeah, it's quite
like,
different.
It's very like simple. Old English is. It's very crude. Middle English has evolved and become more nuanced and complicated,
that
but it's still
makes sense
primitive.
if you're-
But then suddenly you get Modern English, and it's this whole huge thing. And so I think Francis Bacon, you know, Shakespeare is attributed to having enhanced the English language by like 40% or something on his own, right? I don't believe it. But I believe Francis Bacon did with his team of crack experts writing these great plays that swept, you know, across England and everybody. And
They are great
and they're
plays.
they're fabulous.
Just recently
They're
reread
fabulous.
Hamlet, and I'm reading.
Yeah, I mean,
now.
it's just perfect. It's perfect literature, right? All right, go ahead and talk. I think I've come to the end of my strand.
Yeah, well, I was just going to point out that Francis Bacon is renowned for promoting literacy and literature, and so it would make sense that he would come here and try to strengthen our language, because even today we talk less formally than English speakers from England,
Less
or
warmly?
less formally.
Oh, obviously.
Yeah, so he did us a favor, I think.
Well, I think that modern American education system has just, you know, with the economic success after World War II, where the United States owned 50% of the world's wealth, and had control over 70% of the world's resources. It was just bringing in the money. We had the Great Society, and some writers and journalists try to attribute that Great Society to the particular uniqueness of the intellectual talents of that generation, when that's not so. They were just a regular generation that were able to do great things because they had this sudden influx of wealth from around the world and in a generation. And I think our education system,
because they participated in speculative banking, which is why.
Well, that's always been going on, but yeah, that's certainly a zenith moment
Depression,
there, which was before World War II. But however. I think that
World War II
America,
wasn't
with
that
its
great.
technology, because it needs people to run the machines and come up with computer programs, I think that its education system, has been the best in the world, like from the 50s, 60s, 70s, and up until the 80s. But then it's declined because it's gotten us to this point where we understand the ridiculous philosophies of nationalism and propaganda, and we're smart enough and savvy enough to understand all this technology, but now they have to hone it back so that we don't overthink the plans they've laid and see their plans for what they are. Not that we remain trapped. And so I'm almost done. So what they've done is they've pushed us to this intellectual level where now not only do we understand how to run the machines and write computer programs and wait on people and stuff, but we are now there's all these sort of entertainments that are accessible to us that we find deeply endearing that might not have been entertaining to like primitive man, like the ballet or opera, or like a film noir, or a great novel or something like that. They've got us smart enough to not only buy into the bullshit, but they've gotten us smart enough to suddenly be distracted by all these things that their bullshit can offer to humankind. But that shells us off from going that step further and seeing reality using our smarts and our education for what it is, because we're too now entertained and our education for our children and our grandchildren is getting less and less. Like in 1984, the dictionary just got smaller and smaller and smaller every year.
Like the phone book.
Like the phone book. Yeah,
kidding.
Okay. All right, I'm totally done now. It's your turn.
Well, it's true. You should get yourself a nice Oxford English dictionary.
From 1871
well,
or something
just
like
one
that.
of those nice big ones, because they do seem to diminish the words in the dictionary every time you buy one. They seem like cheap imitations of what dictionaries did once used to
Well,
be.
according to any cunning linguist,
But
they would
what I was gonna say
recognize
is
that language is always evolving, and as we become more integrated into this text message culture,
Well,
it's so
diminishing.
natural that the
It's shrinking, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't keep all the lovely words.
the
that
English
we do have.
language vastness is becoming diminished because of it.
But well, it's not becoming diminished if you produce good dictionaries,
Sure.
and I'm sure people still use the words. I try to.
Well, the Bronte sisters never got to sit
Reuse
down
old words
and
when I can.
watch an epic movie like Gone with the Wind or
Well, when
or
the
something
Bronte
like that.
sisters were children, they were
So there's a
reading
trade-off.
Lord Byron,
Well, I'm just saying that culturally there's a trade-off.
and they could speak
That seems to work.
German and French.
Oh yeah, way more literate.
and Latin.
From what I understand, the 19th century, is the most literate, at least in England, Western civilized nations. That's the most literate century that has ever existed.
Yes, it truly is sad, because even today, most people in other countries know 2 languages or more, and we only know English.
Soy estudiante de español, comprendo nada, hablo poquito solamente.
Yeah, I took Latin in high school, some Spanish in college, but yeah, I still only know English. But
Sawete discipule. It's the only Latin I know, other than ergo. All right, I talked and talked. I'm sorry.
cogito ergo sum, I think therefore I am. You know that one, right?
René
Or did you say
Descartes
that?
was a drunken fart. I drink, therefore
Yeah.
I am.
But I was going to say, we can't really blame education because we know that people are not chomping at the bit to get an education.
Not anymore, because they realize that to a degree, unless you're one of the lucky people that get opportunity and chance,
Oh, so
that
do
you
we
can
feel
actually land a job.
Sad for people because they don't want to know.
Well, this
'cause they're not gonna
generation
make money off of it.
particularly, I find, I've been a waiter. I'm just a waiter, so what the hell do I know? But I've been a waiter for 20 years in this Applebee's, and it's not just any 20 years. It's a particularly interesting transitionary 20 years. It spans from the 90s until now, right? In the 90s, there were no cell phones. The internet was like weak sauce still. People had pagers. When you went to college, in like the commons and stuff, you'd see people gathered together and talking, and
We could
you
still
you
smoke
meet all these
cigarettes
people.
in class
Yeah,
when
you
I
could
went to
smoke.
college.
You could smoke cigarettes and play
In
magic
class.
in commons, right? Even in class, yeah. And now, when you go to college, it's like a prayer group because everybody's heads down and they're all like concentrating, and it's all on their cell phones, and no one's talking, and it's kind of an eerie, strange place. It certainly doesn't have the vibrant dynamics that it had. And not only that, there was a healthy economy, and people were going to college, and everybody's getting all these great jobs, and now all of that has been severely diminished and damaged. So for many reasons, it's been an interesting crossover the last 20 years. And what I've seen in the restaurant over the last 20 years is a shift from just uneducated waitresses, or people that are just waitresses, whatever, and never went to college, to working in a restaurant that is staffed with college students or college graduates, yet they come back to they come back to a restaurant or a server job in order to make a reasonable living, because those same opportunities aren't there. And I think that gives me kind of a unique experience in seeing that transition culturally. And that just doesn't apply to people in jobs. It applies to many other things. But of course, that was just the example I'm using to reinforce it. But now that I was so hell-bent on trying to reinforce why I think that I legitimately have a great perspective, I don't remember what the perspective was.
Well, I feel
But I
sad
was
that
trying to-
people don't seem to be interested in an education, and for that you can only blame every individual. I don't think that the soft cage that we've been placed in is absolutely at fault, and I don't think that every young person is falling into the clutches of dumbed down education, but
No, but many, many, many more
We
are.
definitely-
But not everyone. Yes, I agree with that.
have limited dialogue and discourse.
Yes. Yep,
And
guilty.
I think we're almost
Guilty.
at a half hour, so I'm just going to leave us with a quote by C.S. Lewis.
Oh, lovely.
I'm not sure where from. I just found it in my pile of papers, but he says, "It is a bit pompous with our limited performance in the play that we can know the purpose or what the play even is. Ignorant of the future, imperfectly informed of the past." Oh, it's The World's Last Night by C.S.
Oh,
Lewis.
cool. Well, we end this first installment.
I would suggest the C.S. Lewis doodles too, free on YouTube. Those are really good. I think his work
I've seen
is
those.
a little
They are
abridged,
super,
but
super interesting and
it's
insightful.
fun to watch, and he's a smart guy. So
Now I give you the Nancy Pelosi FU clap. And I say thanks
why
for
would
watching.
you say "F you"?
Well, that's Nancy Pelosi at Donald
That's
Trump.
not
When he's
nice.
done, she goes,
There's so many other people to imitate. Why do you feel like you?
because it's
had
fun,
to
funny
do
to
that.
me.
I
Kind
just
of
think
funny.
sometimes you're doing a little Tourette syndrome or something.
Oh,
like
no,
you don't
I
know what
wasn't
you're
doing this for you at all. I was just doing it for the end of the show.
Are you
no,
doing
no.
it for
No,
them?
C.S. Lewis. Yes, no, he's great.
Okay.
And you should listen to everything she said about
Yeah,
him.
I don't
You should
know.
go over the doodles.
That's what I mean.
You
Your
should-
brain.
Yes. Yeah, I'm
You
sorry.
should
No,
try
this.
to use it.
I just always wanted to use the Nancy Pelosi FU
Dust it
clap.
off in there.
All right, thank you.